So after a safety car fueled 2 hours around the dampest dry track maybe ever, we were back at it again. This time returning to Suzuka for the first time since 2019 for this year's Japanese Grand Prix, a race that's been won by Mercedes for 5 years in a row, not including this year obviously. At this point Latifi scoring a point is probably more likely than Mercedes winning a race. Coming in, Max Verstappen had another chance to close out the title given he was over 100 points clear of Leclerc, and a win with fastest lap would guarantee that title no matter where anyone else finished the race. Further back, and it was good news for McLaren as they had managed to jump Alpine for 4th in the constructors' standings. All it took was for both Alpines to DNF and Daniel Ricciardo to not finish like 15th for a change. Hey guys, it's Taron and welcome to the On Track channel and to round 18 in Japan. As always, before we get going, just a quick little reminder that if you do enjoy the video to make sure you give it a thumbs up, it always helps out with YouTube's algorithm, and also get yourself subscribed for more F1 content. Now with those two things out of the way, let's get into my honest review of Formula 1 for the 2022 Japanese Grand Prix. So coming into Japan, first off was the realisation that for those of us in Europe to watch the race live, we'd need to be up at stupid o'clock in the morning. And this shows there are two types of F1 fans, those who are sensible and get up at a normal time and watch some replays, or crazy idiots like me up at 4 or 5 AM to watch some cars drive around some weirdly shaped circles. And with races like these, it really does remind me how much I do not envy any Australian fans. The big news though during the week was that of the budget cap compliance certificates being announced, or as it turned out, not being announced, because the FIA delayed it once again, and so we all have to wait to see if Red Bull have in fact broken the cost cap. Though if they have, I think we found out the reason why. Over at AlphaTauri, and in preparation for the race, Yuki and Pierre were making sure they were feeling relaxed and loose, by having some fun with some karaoke, subsequently reminding us how they are most definitely F1's cutest couple. And then finally on the Thursday we had the drivers' interviews which take place as part of the run-up to the weekend, with Max Verstappen doing his best Here's Johnny impression, and the Dutchman reminding the world of his everlasting love for Daniel Ricciardo. Into FP1 and the rain was well and truly falling, giving us a chance to use the rarely seen wet tyres. Someone not out on those wets though was George Russell, as he was stuck in the garage with repairs and fixes being made to his car. Over at Williams, and Nicholas Latifi was unsurprisingly struggling with the wet conditions. I mean, he also struggles with the dry conditions, but the wet especially, as he went off at the hairpin, locking up both front tyres and going sliding into the gravel. Then, with 20 minutes to go, a few cars were headed out in intermediates, and one of them was George Russell, who had finally emerged from the garage. Just be careful, George, the last time you were on Inters it was Singapore, and that went as badly as Leicester City's start to the season. Someone else on Inters was Charles Leclerc, trying to get to grips with the conditions, and figuring out how he could gain some lap time. Pretty sure going off through the gravel is not how you do it. And rounding off the session we had some practice starts, which usually are just a matter of procedure and pretty straightforward, except this time Mick Schumacher thought he would produce a Mick Schumacher special and destroy the car all on his own, losing the rear through Dunlop and spinning off into the barriers, damaging the front wing and the chassis as well. Into FP2, and with a downpour at the end of FP1 and continued rain in between the sessions, it was more wet weather running. This meant that the Pirelli tyre test that had previously been scheduled for the weekend had to be cancelled as they brought the dry tyres to what had become the year's wettest weekend. But into the session, and to kick us off, it was the gift that keeps on giving, Mr. Nutella himself, Nicholas Latifi, as down towards the final chicane, and there's no other way to put this, he went the wrong way, turning off too early and finding himself facing the barrier with the track about 30 metres to his left. And just to make it even more brilliant, he actually blamed the car, saying there was something strange which was why he was down there. Honestly, after the last race and now this one, the guy's going to become an ambassador for Specsavers soon enough. On to drivers that weren't blind, and to Yuki Tsunoda and his AlphaTauri, who in his home race was taking his car off-roading as he went rallying through the gravel. Also having issues was Charles Leclerc, this time at the hairpin, as he locked up the front and slid off into the gravel but managed to keep the car out of the wall. And someone doing the same was Sergio Perez after he used up all his talent to win in Singapore, with the Mexican driver going off at the hairpin like Leclerc but managing to keep going with no issues. So before FP3 we had an update on the driver situation at Alpine, regarding who would fill the vacant seat left by Fernando Alonso, with the update not coming from a team, but from Fabrizio Romano, as he tweeted out "Here we go" for Pierre Gasly. Honestly, at this point, is there anything this man doesn't know? I mean, Max Verstappen could be changing career paths and signing a deal with Barcelona, and Fabrizio would know about it before Max did. And replacing the Frenchman would be Nick de Vries, as he took the now vacant seat at AlphaTauri. And after all the cost cap drama, I wouldn't be surprised if he's actually a spy sent by Toto Wolff to unearth whatever's going on with the whole Red Bull saga. Onto the action though, and given there was no dry running on Friday, everyone was eager to get out on track, with the entire grid forming an F1 car stampede once the green light was shown at the end of the pit lane. And once the cars were out on track, we had our eyes on Nicholas Latifi, and you don't need me to tell you it wasn't because of his lap times. Instead, it was the Canadian running deep at the final chicane and cutting across it to end his lap. I guess at least this time he made it to the chicane, unlike in FP2. Over at Mercedes, and George Russell was having all sorts of issues with traffic. First off, with Vettel going a bit too slowly into the final corners, and then a whole host of cars including Pierre Gasly up at the hairpin. But come the end of the session, with all the quali runs complete, it was Max Verstappen at the top of the times by almost 0.3 of a second. Into qualifying, and in some attempt to gain a strategic advantage, Mercedes were out on the medium tyres, which meant they had to go again later as both cars were still in the drop zone. Over at McLaren, and for the first time maybe ever, Ricciardo was ahead of Norris, by 0.6 as well, the Australian realising what he has to do to save his seat just a little bit too late. Over at AlphaTauri, and they were struggling, with Tsunoda having the mother of all lockups into the chicane, but with a better final lap he was through into Q2 at his home Grand Prix, which was something that Pierre Gasly couldn't achieve, the Frenchman seemingly not caring about being quick now that he's secured a seat at Alpine for next year. Over at Aston Martin, and where Sebastian Vettel managed to squeak through by 0.5, Lance Stroll, well, kinda didn't, as the only driver he was able to beat was the one that doesn't actually know the track layout. Into Q2, and as expected, it was Max Verstappen who led the way from both Ferraris, and in behind, a team looking good was Alpine, as their pace seemed to be roughly on par with the Mercedes, with everyone's pace generally pretty close considering that after the first runs it was just 3.5 separating the top 9. But onto the final runs, and sadly for Daniel Ricciardo, his run of good form ended at just one Q1 session, as he was knocked out in P11. In fairness, it was just by 0.003 of a second, but let's not let the facts get in the way of a good joke. Also joining him out in Q2 was both Alfa Romeo drivers, as they looked to not be useless anymore, along with Mick and then Yuki, a respectable P13 for him on home debut. Into Q3, and the first point of note came courtesy of Max Verstappen, and not the fact he was miles ahead for a change. Instead, it was a snap of oversteer while warming the tyres on his outlap which forced Lando Norris to take to the gravel in order to get past. And because he nearly caused an unnecessary high-speed crash in qualifying, the FIA came down hard. I'm kidding, they only gave him a reprimand because they're about as harsh as Casper the Friendly Ghost. Over at Mercedes, and their drivers were really evenly matched, setting times just 0.1 of a second apart. Just a shame it's for 7th and 8th place because round Suzuka, the Mercedes is less of a silver arrow and more of a silver Nerf gun. But as we headed into the final runs, it was still Max Verstappen who led the Ferraris in 2nd and 3rd, with Leclerc first across the line, up in sectors 1 and 2 but just falling short by the end of the lap. But could Sainz do any better? The short answer is no, as he stayed in 3rd, 0.5 behind. And because the Ferraris couldn't beat his time, it left Max Verstappen on pole in Japan, with those Ferrari times pretty key, considering on his final run, Max was losing bodywork like the Detroit Lions be losing football games. On to Sunday, and just like Singapore, it was a damp start, with everyone electing for the intermediates to begin. And to say it was then chaotic is an understatement. First off, Verstappen held off Leclerc to maintain the lead into turn 1, but in behind them it was crazy all round, with trouble for Sebastian Vettel in his last Japanese Grand Prix, as he tangled with Alonso into turn 1 due to the fact that everyone was effectively driving blind. But Alonso wasn't done there for opening lap action, as he went up the inside of Lewis Hamilton at the hairpin, but carried a bit too much speed, and so Lewis got the switch back out of the corner to maintain 6th place, which became 5th because up ahead, one of the Ferraris was off and into the barriers, as Carlos Sainz became a passenger in the number 55 train, departing from the track with a destination of the barriers. And in behind there was another car now out of the race, as Alex Albon had pulled over to the side of the track, though for him it was a mechanical failure, with the Williams being both slow and now also unreliable. Behind that, and Zhou Guanyu was getting to grips with his first F1 race at Suzuka, as he went spinning for fun at the hairpin, with Nicholas Latifi narrowly avoiding the accident. Not gonna lie, I didn't think I'd ever be saying Latifi and avoided accident in the same sentence. Over at AlphaTauri, and Pierre Gasly had emerged from all the mess with a new style front wing, as he picked up some advertising that had been loosened from the Sainz crash. I think this takes front wing sponsors to a whole new level. However, as far as Gasly and just racing in general was concerned, there was a far bigger issue, as the tractor used to recover Sainz's car was onto the track before Pierre Gasly went past, which is, well, straight up completely unacceptable, and even more so in these conditions, and made even more poignant at this track in particular. But with all these incidents, combined with increasing amounts of rain, the safety car was called, which very quickly became a red flag as the conditions swiftly became too bad for racing. And about half an hour later, it was time for the restart, this time behind the safety car with the full wet tyres now mandatory, just in case, anyone felt like going mad and banging on a set of slicks. Except, well, we didn't restart as the rain started falling again and the start was suspended. And this was after all the drivers got ready, got into the cars, the marquees were packed away, and everyone was genuinely ready to go, as the race control pulled the F1 equivalent of going psych gotcha, and everyone had to pack up again. And at this point we waited, and still waited, as the clock ticked down to get a race in, with the discussion becoming what pets Valtteri Bottas had, and the answer being a pet reindeer called Rosa. Can you tell that I'm searching for content to fill the gap here? But the main topic of conversation in the delay was about Pierre Gasly passing the tractor, with Twitter getting annoyed that there was a tractor on track, drivers getting annoyed with a vehicle on the track, team bosses annoyed with the situation, Lando tweeting about it all, and race control calling Gasly to the stewards room for speeding under red flag conditions. But that summoning would be after the race, which with 45 minutes on the clock would be getting going again, with Max Verstappen leading away the field with a rolling start and now 40 minutes to go. And from the back of the pack, Vettel and Latifi came in to fit intermediate tyres, and soon everyone else came in as well, except for Mick Schumacher, with Haas hoping for a safety car to swap off the wet tyres. It didn't come, as he was overtaken by everyone down to 10th place before pitting. I mean, it did mean that at one point before that he was in the lead of an F1 race, but it threw away any chance that Haas had of getting a single point. Further down the order, and something quite incredible was happening with Nicholas Latifi. He was running, completely legitimately, in 8th place. Not quite a Verstappen over a second a lap quicker than everyone, but a good Latifi race for a change. Meanwhile, further back after losing places at the pit stops, George Russell was now making progress, getting past Yuki Tsunoda and then Lando Norris in quick succession, up to 9th place. But the main focus was on Lewis Hamilton as he struggled to get past Esteban Ocon for 4th. The pair almost side by side into 130R, but the Frenchman placing his car perfectly to stay ahead, with Hamilton unable to get past as the Mercedes has as much straight line speed as a London bus. But someone not content to sit behind cars though was Fernando Alonso, as he came in for a fresh set of intermediates, with his charge back through the field taking him up into 7th and nearly getting Seb Vettel on the line for 6th place. Up ahead and the fight for 2nd was heating up, with Perez right on the tail of Leclerc, with the Monegasque making a mistake at the final corner of the final lap and going straight on at the chicane. But someone not making any mistakes was Max Verstappen, as he ended up taking a dominant win by 27 seconds in what was effectively just a 28-lap race. And with Leclerc getting a 5-second penalty for the incident with Perez, it meant Max had gained enough points over him and Checo to take the world title and become a 2-time F1 world champion. Or maybe not, as apparently nobody had a clue how points worked after they all crossed the line, with F1 thinking he was the champion, Red Bull not knowing, and everyone else being probably the most confused they've ever been. But as it turned out, F1 was right, and we had probably the most anticlimactic World Championship clinching moment in the history of all sport, maybe ever. But further down the order, there was an even bigger story to talk about, as the real winner here was Nicholas Latifi, who came home in 9th place to claim his only points of the season. Trust Latifi to take centre stage at the championship winning race 2 years in a row. Anyways, that is all for now. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed, do make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more F1 content. But until next time, take care.